The first thing that esoteric students have to understand about human consciousness is that it is a point in space, which has no location in anatomical parts. When active, consciousness hovers over the cortex of the brain and seems to issue forth by concentrating itself through various neurons in the cortex. The point of consciousness we call our identity lies in a combination of force fields which represent the external world: heat, light, sound, electricity, and magnetism. This is graphically illustrated in the case of electrical and magnetic forces which impinge upon the human awareness from the moment of birth. In the first instance, the beating of the human heart creates electrical forces which form an electrical field dispersed throughout the body wherever there are fluids like the blood and plasma and the lymph in motion. The effect of this transporting of fluids in their vessels is to create also a magnetic counterpart of the electrical force field. The human being thus provides his own magnetic field, whose frequency and intensity is monitored by bundles of nerve tissue in the heart. In addition to these basic inherent magnetic forces, we exist within the magnetic field of the Earth, with its characteristic patterns and locations at the North and South Pole and in equatorial regions. Without the Earth's magnetic field, we could not have evolved a sensitive and stable organism under the command of human consciousness. The Earth is also the receptor of the solar wind and the magnetic forces conveyed by it, which interact with the Earth's own magnetic field. We must also take into account the comparatively weak magnetic fields of the planets Jupiter and Mars, and also of our own moon. On the Earth itself, we move socially amongst the electrical and magnetic fields radiated by other humans. Some call these radiations the human aura. In the embryo, we have a developing magnetic field based upon the same principles. But there is a subtle and important factor at play here. Until the moment of birth, the embryo is part of the mother's force fields. At the moment of birth, the child establishes its full circulatory pattern. Thus, the holistic and existential pattern of the field of magnetism is established from the moment that the child takes its first breath. The moment of birth is the most important physiological event in terms of setting up a horoscope, as is the place of birth. On these depend the accuracy of the constructed or computed horoscope. Astrology is thus based on components of time and space. Both time and space have quality, and we say that the interplay of the qualities of time and space at the very moment of birth have a preponderance of influence in shaping the destiny of the human organism thereafter. We have only to look at the qualities of the different seasons of the year, periods of sunspots, and ages of human history to observe differing patterns of time. The Victorian age, in transport alone, is singularly different from the Edwardian age that followed it. And our own era, again, is notably different from the pre-World War II era. Thus, time has qualities imbued within it, and we are susceptible to those qualities. Jung said of time, whatever is born or done in this moment of time has the qualities of this moment of time. The time I experience now is different from the time I experienced 2 hours ago, watching perhaps a documentary in another location. We understand also that spatial dimensions and their qualities vary from place to place the world over. Dangerously hooking the Hindenburg to its moorings in the 30s.
Just holding it. It burst into flame. Wait, get it started. It's crashing, terrible. Oh my, get out of the way.
So different to landing a space shuttle at Cape Canaveral in the 90s. What emerges from all this is that we are stamped with the qualities of time and space at the moment we take the first breath after delivery from the womb. More than that, we are conditioned for the rest of our lives by that auspicious moment, and therefore must obtain as accurate a time and place of birth as possible. When a brood of ducklings hatches from their eggs, they are imprinted by the first creature they observe. Usually, this is the mother duck. They will follow her because they are imprinted at that susceptible moment of hatching. Humankind is imprinted by the moment of birth and the place of birth, and astrology deals with the succeeding events which follow upon the basic formula in time and spatial dimensions provided by the birth details. The sensitivity of the human psyche can only be properly understood when we recognize the existence of those receiving platforms which we call the etheric double, the astral and mental bodies, and those deeply spiritual force fields which we associate with Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, which sequentially mean divine persistent will, compassion and love wisdom, and abstract thought. These subtle bodies or vehicles of human expression are sine qua non to any appraisal of an esoteric science, and especially in studying astrology in depth. Today, because of recent scientific discoveries, we are able to add to our understanding of astrological forces, those impacts within our galaxy which stem from dark matter. Dark matter collectively is the substance of emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical elements that are located in the large spaces between planets and stars. They themselves are held in balance by magnetic forces, which must envelop to some extent our own planetary environs and the magnetic fields of living beings existing therein. The energies of dark matter add their protean influences to forces that impact man and his interpenetrating vehicles. We must clearly understand that astrology is based on the acceptance of man as a composite being, layered in physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual forms that are capable of receiving input from the force fields already described, including those contained in dark matter, which the esoteric sciences have described as the 7 planes. Man may not apprehend the entire gamut of cosmic input, or even that of the planet he lives on, but he is susceptible to it. How are we in astrology to encompass such an immense array of external activity impinging upon the surface area of the brain and the corresponding reactions of human consciousness to this vast input? For convenience sake, we create a 2-dimensional chart of these thousands of processes, placing naturally man at the center of his own map, and we divide the chart into 12 segments which we call houses. We then allocate to these segments the input of all the externa, the impressions which come from the outer world. We also record in our segmented disc the responses we make to the externa. It is a hypothetical structure based on the local coordinates of space and time. The horizontal line extending from the eastern horizon to the western horizon is meant to bisect the chart and separate the daylight area above the surface of the Earth from the nighttime area below it. The vertical axis, or meridian, connects the highest point of the chart over his head with the lowest point beneath his feet. Let us, for convenience sake, call these north and south respectively. The wheel of the houses is a grid into which we place in astrology the patterns of conscious and sometimes even unconscious experiences of which man is capable. It is fortunately a rigid structure, even though hypothetical. It is the basis upon which the whole art of the astrologer is laid out. We refer to the 12 spokes that make up the horoscope wheel as cusps of the houses, a very important word that will be used again and again in unraveling the meaning of our charts. The proximal cusp is at the beginning of a house, and the distal cusp at its end. So the proximal cusp of the first house, for example, marks the eastern horizon. This is the ascendant, the most important part of the horoscope, as we shall see later, and the place where the heavens rise. Directly opposite is the descendant, which is on the cusp of the 7th house. The highest point of the chart is referred to as the midheaven, or MC, and it is on the cusp of the 10th house. Directly below is the nadir, on the cusp of the 4th house. It is easier to understand the structure of the houses in terms of time if we consider the position of the sun at different times of the day. At dawn, around 6 a.m., the sun is rising over the ascendant. As the day progresses, the sun climbs to the midheaven, the position that indicates noon, approximately. During the afternoon, the day wanes towards sunset, which is marked by the cusp of the 7th house, the descendant, and corresponds to around 6 p.m. After dark, the sun proceeds on the other side of the earth, reaching the nadir at around midnight, before once again climbing to the ascendant to herald a new day. Every facet of life and every experience we can have fits into one or other of the 12 houses. Each segment contains accoutrements of the personality, which have a common collective sympathy with each other. And these are described in detail in our 2 videotapes on the subject of the houses. We must now introduce additional factors in order to give our astrological chart acuity and effectiveness. The basic infrastructure of the houses is overlaid with a unique pattern of the heavens, which was stamped upon us at the specific time and place of our birth. We are imprinted by the heavens above us, and our individual destiny is bound up with the destiny of the cosmos. As above, so below. This is the basis of astrological influence. As above, so below, and was the subject of our video with this title. Beyond the solar system, the heavens, as we know, are filled with stars. Many have been combined by man through the ages to form what we call the constellations. We are interested in a circle of 12, from which the familiar signs of the zodiac derive their names, and the associated glyphs which represent them. In the course of a year, the sun, as seen from the earth, passes through all 12 of these signs. Each sign has its own qualities, often represented by symbols. Thus we have Aries the ram, Taurus the bull, Gemini the twins, Cancer the crab, Leo the lion, Virgo the maiden, Libra the scales, Scorpio the scorpion, Sagittarius the archer, Capricorn the goat, Aquarius the water bearer, and Pisces the fishes. The qualities of the 12 signs of the zodiac are described in detail in their respective videos. Each sign of the zodiac has an affinity with one of the 12 houses, which we call its natural house, and where we shall place them in a band on the rim of the wheel of the houses. Thus, the impulsive, persistent, and initiating sign of Aries is powerfully related to the first house of state and soul and attitude. Possessive and fixed Taurus is correlated to the second house of finance, resources, and values. Communicative and intelligent Gemini aligns with the third house of education, brothers and sisters, and short journeys. Sensitive, caring, and nurturing Cancer is in the fourth house of the home and family. Self-expressive and warm-hearted Leo in the fifth house of creativity, pleasure, and children. Analytical and detailed Virgo in the sixth house of work, health, and service. Fair and balanced Libra in the seventh house of partners, marriage, and legal matters. Passionate and intense Scorpio in the 8th house of other people's money, legacies, and sex. Aspiring and far-reaching Sagittarius in the 9th house of higher education, foreign travel, and philosophy. Ambitious, cautious, and serious Capricorn in the 10th house of career, father, and public standing. Detached and humanitarian Aquarius in the 11th house of friends, groups, hopes and wishes. And finally, secretive and devotional Pisces in the 12th house of institutions, hidden matters, and the unconscious. This is called the natural chart, which is merely used to show the affinity between the signs and houses. Let us now consider an actual horoscope. The houses are a fixed and static structure in the horoscope, but with the daily rotation of the Earth, the heavens appear to move around the chart in a clockwise direction, completing one revolution in 24 hours. At the moment of birth, the 12 signs become fixed in their positions on the framework of the 12 houses. And if we examine our own horoscopes, we would find out which sign we have on the cusp of the 1st house, the 2nd house, the 3rd house, and so on. Due to the constant movement of the signs, we can see that for only 2 hours out of 24 do the signs align with the cusps of their natural houses. Therefore, most horoscopes, you will see, will not reflect the natural position of the signs. Nevertheless, the affinity between a sign and its natural house always remains, no matter which actual house the sign is located in. Each sign takes 2 hours to rise above the eastern horizon, the cusp of the 1st house. The sign found in this position at birth is called the ascendant, or rising sign, and indicates the soul's purpose. What we have now introduced is an ever-present moving band of influence, which is termed the zodiac. We are born with a particular zodiacal sign on the horizon at birth, and each of the spokes or cusps of the 12 houses bears its respective sign, which has a great influence over the matters of the house and is of major significance when interpreting the chart. You will hear the usual chatter of astrologers using terms like, "He has Scorpio in the 4th," "Oh, there is violence in the home," and with Capricorn in the 6th, arthritis is a likely medical factor, and so on. So far, we have considered 2 sources of astrological information stored in the horoscope: the fixed wheel of the houses and the moving band of the signs. There is a 3rd source of information, which is another moving band of the 12 planets. The planets, like the signs, have associated glyphs to represent them. Seen from an astrological viewpoint, the sun and the moon are also planets. In addition, there is Vulcan, a planetary energy used in esoteric astrology that manifests physically through the asteroids and meteors that inhabit the solar system. Then there is the Earth, another addition to esoteric astrology. The Earth is the only heliocentric planet in the horoscope, and always placed directly opposite the Sun. Listed from the Sun outwards, the 12 planets are Sun, Vulcan, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the remote Pluto. The nature and properties of the planets are detailed in our video on the subject. If for a moment we stop the clockwise movement of the signs, we can see that the planets have independent anti-clockwise movement. The Moon is the fastest moving planet, taking a little over 27 days to pass through all the signs. The Sun takes 1 year. Saturn, on the other hand, takes a little over 28 years. And the outer planets even longer, with Pluto having an orbital period of 248 years. Again, there is a sympathy between a particular planet and the sign that it rules and the house which is its home. Looking again at our natural chart, we find Aries in its happiest position on the cusp of the first house. Now we must add Aries' ruling planet Mercury, placing it also in the first house. These three together we call a category, and have a powerful and enduring affinity with each other wherever they are located in a horoscope. We can continue placing the remaining planets in their natural position to complete the natural chart. Remember, however, that the natural chart only represents the affinities between the planet, sign, and house, and can never occur in reality. These affinities or rulerships should be learnt by heart, and so we ask our students to run through a series of astrological phrases in order to establish the language, the glyphs, and the meaning of the terminology of this profession. Please therefore repeat several times each day, at least for the first few weeks, the conjugation of the three factors which make up each basic category. Mercury is ruler of Aries and lord of the first house. Vulcan is ruler of Taurus and lord of the second house. Venus is ruler of Gemini and lord of the third house. Neptune is ruler of Cancer and lord of the fourth house. Sun is ruler of Leo and lord of the fifth house. Moon is ruler of Virgo and lord of the sixth house. Uranus is ruler of Libra and lord of the seventh house. Mars is ruler of Scorpio and lord of the eighth house. Earth is ruler of Sagittarius and lord of the ninth house. Saturn is ruler of Capricorn and lord of the 10th house. Jupiter is ruler of Aquarius and lord of the 11th house. Pluto is ruler of Pisces and lord of the 12th house. At the heart of all professions is the descriptive language of that profession. We understand that lawyers must have their own legalese, the language of their profession, in which they can express legalities in their own mumbo-jumbo, which may make no sense to their clients, but a lot of sense to themselves. Medicine has its own medicalese, and in astrology we have our own language. It is vital for the student to repeat almost ad nauseum the elements of astrologies, so that in due course he may use that language to consult with other astrologers and to give an accurate and definitive meaning to the astrological subject under consideration. We now have an understanding of how the elements of human consciousness are laid out in the horoscope. The two bands of signs and planets moving in opposite directions around the fixed disk of the houses complete the factors that influence us and provide us with modifications and amplifications of the space-time structure of our destiny. The mechanism of the horoscope is a difficult concept to grasp, and perhaps an analogy may be drawn to the one-armed bandits played in the arcades and casinos. 3 bands of glyphs in the fruit machine rotate against each other with a pull of the lever. They come to a halt in a combination of 3. And so in the heavens, the bands of the planets and the signs constantly rotate, combine and recombine, and at birth each planet comes into alignment with a particular sign and house. For example, Venus and Sagittarius in the 5th house, which we show here as a triad of symbols. This combination is termed an aspect and contains astrological meaning. In our next video, you will learn how to extract aspects, and with the help of an astrological dictionary, begin to derive information and meaning from the horoscope.